everyone. My name is Yomara Angel, and I serve as the Strategy Manager for Post-Secondary Access at Alabama Possible. I am the moderator for this session. Thank you so much for joining. This breakout session, correlation between dating violence, mental health, academics, and grants available to address it, is focused on a conference theme of student success in post-secondary education. Our presenters are Suzanne Montgomery Clark and Meredith Montgomery Price from the Megan Montgomery Foundation. Both of their bios are published in the program if you like further details. We will have time for Q&A at the end of the session, so if you have any questions, feel free to add them to the Zoom chat. When you exit the session at the end, you'll be asked to complete a brief survey that will appear on your browser. Now, I'll turn it over to the presenters.
Suzanne, like CMR said, and Manisha and Chandra and Anando, thank y'all so much for inviting us. This is great to be here. What I wanted to share before we get started is that this is a tough presentation in the beginning to listen to because we're talking about relationship violence. So the beginning is hard to listen to sometimes for some people. We don't want to trigger anybody. There's nothing provocative or anything in here. But at the end, I want y'all to stick with us because at the end, Meredith will give you all the hopeful, positive, encouraging, wonderful information about our grants and the wonderful things that schools are doing with our grants. So please stick with us till the end. And also I wanted to say that throughout our presentation, we mentioned perpetrators, and in our presentation, we most of the time say male perpetrators. We don't even say that. We usually just say men and young boys. And the reason we do that is because 95% of the violence in this country, particularly violence against women, is perpetrated by men and boys. And so we just say that for ease of presentation. We absolutely know that boys and men are affected as well. So we're not forgetting about that, but we're just, for ease of presentation, for ease of understanding, we usually mention men and boys as perpetrators. Okay, so y'all stick with us on that. So thank you so much for being here. So we'll get started. Take out your cell phones because we're going to ask you to answer a few questions on our survey, and they're totally anonymous. And so we're going to put up a QR code. The number one question before we even get started with our agenda is, what do you believe causes domestic violence or relationship violence, one and the same? So just type in something quick on your phone and it will appear on the screen. And once you scan this QR code, it will give you the question on your phone. Control, drug, alcohol abuse, past trauma, poor coping skills, cycle of abuse, psychotic insecurity. Two people are typing, family history, drug, alcohol abuse, poor coping skills, history. I think we've got 15 people in the room, so we'll wait just a minute to try to get everybody. Family history, trauma, control, history, family history. Okay, that's good. Thank you. These are all contributing factors to domestic violence or relationship violence, but they're not the cause. The cause is because one individual makes a conscious choice to control or harm another. We have millions of people in this world who have mental health issues, drug and alcohol abuse issues, family history, dysfunction in the home issues, and they don't choose to hurt their partner, okay? So those are just contributing factors, all the things that were just listed. It's not caused by the behavior of the victim ever. Here's what we're going to talk about today. Obviously, we're going to talk about my daughter, Megan, Meredith's sister, Megan, and what happened with her and her ex-husband. And we're going to talk about relationship and dating violence and how student success relates to relationships and mental health. And we're going to talk about our grant making to colleges and high schools, and then our impact and outcomes. This is our family. Meredith was 10 years older than Megan. And Rod and I married when the girls were 6 and 16, raised them in the Catholic school system, Catholics all the way up to seniors in high school. This is Megan. She got her degree at UAB, got her master's degree, and then she was employed by UAB as a writer in the School of Nursing. And then she was very active in the junior board of the Greater Birmingham Humane Society. She thought her mission in life was to save animals, and that's what she did in her spare time. When she was 29 years old, she went on the first date with the individual who would end her life. Of course, he presented himself like Prince Charming, as they do. They all do. That's how perpetrators work. And of course, he was not. This is the typical stereotype of what everybody thinks abusers look like, okay? But that's not true. They look like this, or this, or this, or this, or this, okay? They come from all walks of life. 6 weeks before Megan died, well, she left the relationship after about a year and a half, and this was 6 weeks before she died. She had already escaped, and she said, I want to show women the warning signs, why it's so hard to get out, to help them with the legal system. I'm embarking on my new calling to help other girls and other victims. And so this is what she believed she was called to do after it happened to her. This is our last family Christmas picture together, taken on Thanksgiving. And Megan was just real happy this day because she was getting ready to testify in court next week. And so this was going to be our Christmas card that year. She was going to testify against him on December 4th. A judge had postponed her case for 213 days, and judges are not supposed to put criminal cases behind divorce cases. The judge wanted to hear her divorce case before he heard the criminal case, and that's against the code in the state of Alabama. So she waited that long. So this was on December 4th. She was going to testify, and she would be free. And so I'll let y'all read the next 2 slides for yourself. We waited 17 months and took a plea deal because he admitted guilt, and he got a 30-year sentence, and he lost his right to appeal. And that was the best we felt we could get because juries typically don't give long sentences to wife murders or partner murders. The only thing we could do to move forward, it came from Romans 12:21. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And so that's what we're trying to do with our foundation. So how are we doing that? By educating everybody we can on the realities of relationship violence, particularly young people, share what we didn't know and what Megan didn't know, and advocate for change with our foundation funding. And we'll get to that. So how does somebody like Megan even become a victim? She was just like the 1,900 other women in the US who were killed that same year in 2019 because the criminal justice system failed her as it failed every woman who died at the hands of their partner. He was never held accountable from age 16 on because domestic violence behaviors start early as teenagers. There are indicators out there. He wasn't held accountable by his friends, his peers, the police, the judges. Nobody ever held him accountable. And she and we didn't know the red flags. And that's what healthy relationship education has to do with. What are the red flags of a potentially abusive partner? We were all so naive. It took us 5 years to research and find out the realities of relationship violence. This is our brochure that we hand out everywhere we go. We've handed out thousands of these. Schools hand these out. And it's just got a couple of the red flags of potentially abusive relationships and the love bombing tactics that are in it. And just from this simple information here, which is certainly not a thorough education, people have left potentially abusive partners just based on reading this. There is no typical victim. Megan was just like every other victim. It cuts across every race, age, income, and educational level. Nobody is safe from it just because of their race, age, or income. It is the leading cause of injury to women more often than car accidents, muggings, and stranger rapes combined. The definition is any pattern of behavior in an intimate relationship that's used to gain power and control over another. It can be threats, intimidation, or fear. More commonly, that's what it is. It can be emotional, psychological, physical, or sexual. And every victim we've ever talked to has said the emotional and the psychological and the threats and the fear are much, much greater and stay with the victim many, many years, more so than the physical. It starts early. 8.5 million women and 4 million men have been affected in the United States. And they first experienced this or other forms of violence before the age of 18. And that's why we're talking with y'all today. So what is it for teenagers? It's a form of intimate partner violence that includes sexual violence, psychological aggression, physical violence, or stalking. Females between the age of 16 and 24 experience the highest rate, 3 times the national average for older women. 1 in 3 teens will experience physical, sexual, or emotional abuse from someone they're in a relationship with before becoming adults, but they never tell anyone. 33% never tell anybody, so it's so hard to discover it. Their barriers, the reason they don't report is shame, embarrassment, not wanting anybody to know. They're afraid they're not going to be believed, which is true. Many times they're not believed. Fear of retaliation by their partner, which is a very real fear. So answer this question for us, if you would. Have you ever known anyone who's been a victim of relationship violence?
So we have a few no's and a lot of yes.
Okay. All right. And that's typical. Every audience we talk to, whether it's teenagers or adults, counselors, the numbers are real high. They're always above 60%. This is the spectrum of how a relationship can go from healthy to abusive. In the beginning, with a good relationship with teenagers or even adults, you have respect between each other, good communication, trust, and honesty. With an unhealthy relationship, and these are the things that are talked about with kids in high school and colleges, particularly in high school. They learn about what pressure is, peer pressure, dishonesty, control, and inconsiderate behavior inside a dating relationship. And then when it becomes abusive, it can be accusations, actual physical harm, isolating your partner, manipulating the relationship. And these are what, 12 topics on this piece of paper right here. Well, when they do this in high schools, when they educate kids on this in high schools or college, they will take an hour on each one of these topics. So an hour could take 12 weeks. If you did an hour a week with a class on healthy relationships, you could be talking about each one of these for at least an hour and get in a deep dive on each one of these. And then also these topics, again, 1 hour on each one of these is typically what a high school or college will do if they're doing this throughout the year. They talk about intensity, manipulation, sabotage, possessiveness, isolation, belittling, guilting, deflecting responsibility. And so many kids think this is normal behavior, and it's not. Volatility, betrayal. This is so important for kids to know about this before they get to college. Social media abuse is another big issue for kids nowadays, and I'm sure everybody knows about this. 36% of dating college students have given their dating partner their computer, email, or social network passwords. They are more likely to experience digital dating abuse if they've shared their password. Of course, it's not their fault. And with digital abuse, they have a lot of manipulation, such as, I'm not giving you my password. Well, what do you have to hide? If you really love me, you give it to me. Or guilting. Can you send me a picture without anything on? I promise I won't share it. It'll disappear on Snapchat. All my friends get them from their girlfriends. And then possessiveness. Why did you like her photo? You told me you were going by your friends, but I see you're in town. Why are you lying? Who are you with? Send me your location now. This is very unhealthy behavior. But with kids, this has become normalized. Have you ever known anybody harmed by digital dating abuse? If y'all would answer this one, please. Okay, thank you. The teenage responses are much higher. We talked to a high school football team recently. One of our volunteer speakers did, and he asked the same question. And the high school football team, 83% of them said yes, they knew somebody who had been hurt by digital dating abuse. And then we talked to a high school group recently, high school girls here in Birmingham, and 69% of the 100 and something girls in the room said yes, they knew somebody who'd been hurt by digital dating abuse. This is a good quote. One of the most vexing issues I had to deal with as a president of the university was protecting our students from sexual assault and misconduct. Protecting students is paramount. 1 in 5 women, 1 in 13 men, and 1 in 4 trans or gender nonconforming students have experienced sexual assault on campus. It is the most underreported crime, with under 10% ever reporting their assault. Dropouts. The overall dropout rate for freshmen is, from the research we've seen, is 24.3%. Victims of sexual assault, however, 34%, much higher. Due to their trauma, depression, anxiety, desire to physically distance from the perpetrator, they are afraid to stay on campus. So there's a direct correlation between dropping out. They have limited career options, lower earning potential, financial burden, potential conflict with their family because of the trauma of having been assaulted. Even with alcohol and drug abuse, a non-victim on campus, 17% of non-victims would experience alcohol and drug abuse, but for a rape victim, 40% would use alcohol and drug abuse to dull the pain. So that's a huge correlation. They use coping behaviors to dull the pain, abuse of alcohol, tobacco, drugs, increased risk of depression. We just said all this, and greater increased risk of poor work and school performance. They can't concentrate. Victims either in school or out of school as adults. Increased risk for dropping out of school. So what about current services for victims? Aren't those available? Well, sure. But shelters and counseling provide services after somebody's hurt, after the anxiety, depression, and PTSD has affected their lives for many years after the relationship ends. So this is not the ultimate answer. It is an answer, of course. Of course, we've got to counsel victims. Of course, we've got to get them back to a normal life, a healthy life. So of course, these are critical services, but this can't be all we do. Here's what the CDC recommends. We need to be teaching safe and healthy relationship skills. We need to engage influential adults and peers, particularly men and boys, for bystander empowerment so they learn how to speak up when they see a friend insulting somebody, disrespecting somebody, abusing somebody, manipulating somebody. We need to create protective environments and improve school climate and safety so that kids feel safe to report, so they don't feel like they'll be blamed. Here's a couple of examples that we've seen recently in our work. Mom of a 13-year-old, this was a lawyer who, a lawyer who spoke to us after a Rotary meeting that we spoke to, and she said she had a 13-year-old daughter who broke up with her boyfriend on the phone one night. And when she went to school the next day, the 13-year-old boyfriend followed her in the little girl's bathroom and shoved her up against the wall, slammed her up against the wall is what the mom said. And the mom, of course, brought it to the principal, and the principal looked at the little girl and said, "What did you do to provoke him? That is not a safe space to report." She's learning, that little girl's learning real easy, real early, don't report, okay? And a counselor in another city called us from a middle school, and she said, "Well, y'all could come talk to us." A judge said we needed to have y'all come talk to our kids. And so we sent a counselor up there. We don't typically talk to kids. We get counselors to talk to kids. So the counselor went up there, and here was the story that they told me on the phone. Their middle school girls, they were having problems with their middle school girls sending nude pictures to their boyfriends. And I said, "Well, how did that happen? The girls just all got together and decided they'd do this as a team?" And she said, "Well, of course not. The boys were manipulating and convincing the girls to do it." And the problem with what that counselor said was she was blaming the girls for the problem. She said she had a problem with the girls. Well, that's a problem. That's not a safe space, because you've got a counselor blaming the girls for sending the pictures when those girls are underage victims. It's against the law. It's against the law what those boys were doing, and yet the girls were being blamed for sending pictures to the boys. And that's why she wanted us to talk to the girls. Needless to say, the counselor went up there and had a good conversation with the girls, and then the next month they had a conversation with the boys, which was good. From One Love Foundation, which is one of our partners, they have curriculum that they've been providing across the nation to over 1 million kids in the last 12 years. They say research shows that open discussions among peers about dating challenges can help prevent dating abuse. And we know that to be true. The data is out there that proves it. So now that I've given you all the horrible news, Meredith's going to give you the good news of our foundation.
Hey, everybody. We're glad that you're here for our session. I am Meredith, and I'm the executive director of Megan Montgomery Foundation, and Megan was my little sister. Here's our response. We could only do one thing. We started a 501c3, the Megan Montgomery Foundation, to prevent domestic violence, Inc. And our sole mission is to prevent relationship violence before it starts. This is snapshot of what we do. We raise funds and we proactively engage school leaders so that we can give grants to schools and for them to provide the healthy relationship programs year round, not just one time. And it's to empower the students with the tools and skills to recognize unhealthy behaviors before it escalates to violence. We provide grants to nonprofits, high schools, and colleges to provide age-appropriate healthy relationship education. Megan's Foundation does not do any education. We don't run programs, and what it's doing is it's saving victims from being hurt the first time. So we're going upstream and not letting them jump in. And it's what Megan wanted to do. That's the whole reason why we're doing it. So it makes way more sense to give teens the skills they need to have healthy relationships in life right now than to help them after. So we're preparing them for their life today rather than picking up the pieces later. The president of the AAU said research says long-term exposure to prevention training is key to preventing sexual and dating violence. But many institutions satisfy the federal requirements, which is through a single workshop, which is usually offered during orientation. These are some of the biggest barriers to year-round programs. There's a lack of time, lack of staff, and a lack of money. So there are dozens of evidence-based and sound programs that exist for healthy relationship education. However, the schools need someone to deliver the services. So here's our little simple formula for success. You have a grant from our foundation plus the evidence-based healthy relationship programming, and you get a healthy relationship program for the students, which is relationship violence prevention. Here are a few of evidence-based curricula to choose from. These is just a few. There's so many out there. That the few at the top are free. And then several of them, obviously, you have to pay for, but depending on what it's for, that's where, you know, our funding may come in. So why healthy relationship education? Well, there are so many agencies that exist that help survivors of domestic violence, which is secondary prevention after the harm occurs. They are much needed. And the survivors live with trauma-induced fear, anxiety, and depression, and PTSD, and years of recovery. And most colleges provide counseling and Title IX services, which address the harm after it occurs again. And we are the only Alabama charity solely devoted to prevention. So you might want to know what exactly is healthy relationship education. It's not faith-based, it's not sex ed, but here's what it is. I'll let you read some of those. Learning about regulating your emotions, respecting others, consent, resolving conflict, intervening as a bystander, all before the harm occurs. The Chronicle of Higher Ed said school-based activities can make a profound difference in the lives of young adults. And even a small support to schools will make a difference. Here are some, is our small support. These are just some logos of all the colleges and organizations, or schools, I'm sorry, and organizations that we have given grants to. And this is a little graph that kind of gives you a little snapshot of some of the results. We've given 270,000 of total grants and funding awarded. And we've reached, well, about 18,000 have learned about healthy and unhealthy relationships. We've supported over 22 schools and 20 plus counties reached all over Alabama. We have about 43 volunteers annually, and we've spoken over 100 times, I think now, public speaking engagements. And here's some of our grants from 2022 to 2024. And I'll just let you read some of these. Some of these schools, we've given 2 and 3 second and third grants to them. Well, and a couple of these are actually from this year, so we've been busy. So here are some examples of healthy relationship programs with our grants. We request that it is provided in multiple doses throughout the year and not just one presentation. You can't learn math in 1 hour. So you can't learn about relationships.
Sorry, Meredith, let me interject right here. We have a speakers bureau, and we can also go speak to a school to introduce them to this as a 1 hour session. And then after that, and what we do is if we talk to students, we measure the interest of the students in having this throughout the year. And we do these for free all the time, and our Speakers Bureau does these for free all the time because we want schools to understand what this is all about. So we will go in and do a one-off presentation, but when it comes to our funding, we fund education throughout the year for the school. So we'll give them a grant for education throughout the year.
Here is a picture of Wallace State. They had a healthy relationship event, and we're giving a check to them. It was the first event they had. The program was healthy relationships, and many student athletes came up afterwards and said that this was the first time I've ever heard about healthy and unhealthy relationships and how to tell the difference.
And we hear that everywhere.
A Harvard study of 3,000 students said 18 to 25-year-olds, there were 70% of them wish they had received more guidance on romantic relationships. And 76% of them never had conversations with parents on how to avoid sexually harassing others. At ASU, they had a man-to-manpower event, and Cheryl Lang, the director of violence against women, said it was hosted by men and boys only. It was an event only for ASU boys and high school boys. And here's some of their leaders on campus. And then here is UAB did something called Rock Out the Red Zone. And my question to you is, do any of you know what the red zone is on college campuses? You can say yes or no, or you can type in what you think it is or what you know it is.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and we got
go ahead and just go. I don't know why
you want me to move forward.
Yeah, go ahead and go forward. I don't know why we can't see. Oh, there's some answers.
Oh, there they are. Oh, they all came at the last. Sorry about that.
Higher occur, holiday break, sexual number, false adults higher. Okay. So here.
Well, you just the first 6 weeks is the greatest risk for sexual assault on college campus. That's what the definition is, the red zone.
And here is an event that UAB had. It was called Rock Out the Red Zone, and all the students attended, and a lot of students attended and had to go to different tables where they had different providers, and each table they had a little punch card, and they would get a punch, and once they got all their punches, then they got a free meal, which was provided by our foundation. And we have heard that, you know, a lot of grants do not provide funding for food and stuff like that. We do. We want you to get the kids in however you can, and that's food, swag. You know, we just get them there, and that's what matters. So here's a few results and the impact of colleges using our grants. At the ASU Men and Boys events, 83% strongly agreed that attending the event increased their awareness of sexual domestic dating and stalking violence laws. Here's a few of their mothers' testimonials, which are just so powerful. She said, "Thank you for exposing my 15-year-old son to a phenomenal program. Respect for women is what really brought me to tears. I can't begin to thank you for the time spent with my son." And then the mom of a 16-year-old boy said, "The Manpower event was an eye-opener for me. My son was so upbeat after the session. In a morally decadent world, you not only produce mentally sound young men, but morally upright ones. And all we can do is say thank you so much." And at the survey after the event, some of the boys said it was a cool class that talked about how to treat women. No means no, and that should be respected. And then one said, "Thank you for a wonderful seminar. I felt uplifted after hearing the leaders. I pray that others will come and learn what I did. Goodbye." UAB, some of their results: 96% feel more confident in their ability to address unhealthy characteristics early in a relationship. And 93% have a better understanding of consent. And what we found is college students are not equipped. 78% of them say it's important to intervene when you see a friend being abused. However, 58% of them say they don't know how. And that's, you know, training for bystander moments. Be an upstander, not a bystander. You learn how to halt inappropriate behavior, how and when to speak up, be a voice for the voiceless, and you practice scenarios like role play. And, you know, what would you actually say in this situation? At Alabama A&M, sadly, they lost their cheerleader, one of their cheerleaders, Chi McDade. She was murdered by her boyfriend. She was, you know, all-star student, and the school was just reeling with grief when we came to speak. And that's my mom and Rod, and then Cleo Callahan in the middle there is was the director of DV services at the YWCA. And we expected, you know, about, I don't know, 20, 30 kids, and there ended up being about 150 kids show up because their Divine Nine all showed up in Panhellenic Council, and it was just so powerful. And it's because they lost someone on their campus, and they wanted to see what we had to say.
And remember the young man who raised his hand?
Oh yeah, there was a young man who raised his hand after the speaking engagement, and he said, "What do? I have a friend who is abusing his girlfriend. What can I do to stop him?" And the fact that he raised his hand and said that in front of a group of all those people, first of all, is just so powerful and brave and courageous. And we obviously had him speak with Cleo afterwards, because she is a licensed counselor, so she could direct him, give him the right direction to help his friend possibly.
And that's what we would like to see more of, for young men to speak up and say, how can I help stop it?
Some of the student feedback at UWA, they said the section on preparing bystanders to recognize and stop predatory behavior was particularly empowering, and the practical tips that were shared gave us the confidence to intervene effectively. And at Wallace State, after 1 year of healthy relationship programs, they reported a 58% increase in the number of students willing to report if they witnessed an incident of relationship abuse. And at ASU, 100% answered yes to will you consider providing some kind of intervention if you witnessed an abusive incident, with 70% of them saying they would call the police, which is being a good bystander. And I'm sure you all remember the story of Natalie Holloway, the high school student that was killed in Aruba. If all of her friends or the whole class that she was in, what if they had bystander intervention training, and they saw her walk off with those two boys? You know, the results, I mean, the ending might be completely different. And we don't blame the kids whatsoever for not stopping it. It's just, what if they had this training? Sanford had a class on consent. And this is one of the postcards that they created with some of our funding. They passed these out, and it just shows the pillars of consent and the definition. And the University of West Alabama had a class on consent as well. And they had one of their learning objectives is called hookup. And they learned the difference between a healthy hookup, a regretted hookup, and sexual assault. And they learned about consent as well. And they learned the perpetrator's use of hookup culture norms, which, for example, using alcohol to mask true intentions, and understanding the myth that rape is just a regretted sexual experience, and provided techniques for successful bystander intervention. These are some posters that Gadsden State put up all across their campus, provided by Soteria Solutions, which our funding paid for. Just for an example, she says, after we broke up, Nick posted naked pictures of me online. I don't know what to do. And her friend says, "You don't deserve this. Let's contact the Violence Prevention Program. They'll be able to help." And there's a QR code down there at the bottom that they can scan, and they can go talk to someone. And each school personalizes their programs. We want them to. We don't dictate that. This is one school. They created these little buttons. It said Love Fest, promoting healthy relationships, and they had like a big LGBTQ section, and it was just, you know, promoting love, like Love Fest. The second school here, their slogan was "Speak Up, Be a Voice." That was from their Title IX office. Obviously, it was a Christian school because there's a Bible verse. And this last one is our favorite. It says, "I asked the cutie before I touched the booty." And that was a pin for their program on consent. And excuse me, we spoke at a trio conference, and we showed this slide, and one of the boys raised his hand and he said, "I helped create that pin." And he was just so proud of it. And we were like, "You did an awesome job." And it's like they have a leg in the game, you know, when they help with some of these creations.
And he was actually a first gen student too, which was neat.
So, can you answer this question? Do you think that healthy relationship education should be offered in high schools or colleges, or both, or neither? We usually get the same answer on this one, but we still like to see what people have to say. And some people are answering in the chat. So most people are saying yes, both. Right after Megan died, we received a letter from a survivor to our foundation, and she wrote a $20 check. And this is just an excerpt from her letter. It's so powerful. She said, "If I could only have had this education in high school or college, it could have saved me from years of abuse, trauma, and heartache. And more importantly, my children could have avoided it too." So if you would like more information about our grants, you can go on our website, which is megansfoundation.org, and there's information explaining our grants, or you can email me, which here's my email, meredith@megansfoundation.org. And our next grant cycle, the deadline is July the 1st. And our application is only 2 pages, not 1,000 like the federal government or the state government. We have a very short and sweet application.